Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 19th. Hope everybody is having a great day so far. If you are just tuning in, we're about to go over a lot of stuff today, whether that be the dream offseason of different NFL teams, a scary situation for others, as well as what the MLB season might look like for some, and of course, taking a look at the bracketology or the bubble watch for a lot of teams as we head into March right around the corner. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 19th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic of the day, that being around the Bengals and what could be a franchise-altering offseason. They have not one, not two, not three, but four major pieces that need to be figured out this season. You have one that's asked for a trade that if he doesn't get traded, probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for them. In Jermaine Pratt, he's not up for a contract, but he was their leading tackler last season. And that might not mean much because Jermaine Pratt and that Bengals defense were not very good. But you have one of your leaders in the clubhouse wanting out after he just signed a 3-year deal a couple seasons ago. He's still got 1 year left on his contract. He wants out. He wants to go to a new team. If you can get a lot for him, go for it. But this is a guy that I think is really valuable to your defense, especially when you're trying to rebuild it with these young guys from the draft, with some free agents that you're taking a shot on. This is one that I think is very important to keep around if you can. Obviously, the other defender and the three key free agents that are out there for them, that's going to be the two wide receivers and the runner-up for the Defensive Player of the Year in Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson ended up leading the league in sacks last season with 17 and a half. He had an amazing year. He was a guy that the Bengals defense, believe it or not, would have been even worse without him out there. There were games where he got shut out, sure, but that happens to every defender in the league nowadays. There's not a single defender this year that it did not happen to at least once. Trey Hendrickson is a must re-sign. Having an elite edge rusher is the foundation of a defense. And we saw guys all season really target in on Trey Hendrickson because the rest of that Bengals defensive line, the rest of that Bengals defense wasn't really anything special, and he still managed to get 17 and a half sacks on the year. He's been one of the more underrated players in the NFL for a hot minute there. Now, Trey Hendrickson is a guy that they need to work a contract out with, and he is a guy that I think will command top edge rusher money. When it comes to the wide receivers, obviously, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are the center of conversation for this team. We've seen Joe Burrow go on a media tour. It's basically saying, the Bengals, you need to go and sign everybody. I can't do this without help. I really would like it if you would sign them. And the first move that the Bengals have to make this offseason is going to be to restructure the contract with Joe Burrow. They can convert some of the money into a signing bonus. He makes $55 million every year. That's going to be a huge, huge piece of the puzzle to help them configure enough to get into the cap. Now, the cap numbers came out today. It's going to be anywhere from $277 million to $281 million. That is a lot of money. It was up from $255 last season, so that is almost a $25 million jump. That's exactly what a lot of these teams needed. Now, that was already projected over there, right? These are guys that it's going to grow. It's always projected to grow, which is why contracts age better. And that goes directly into the Jamar Chase conversation. Jamar Chase and the Cincinnati Bengals were unable to come up with a contract agreement in the last offseason. They were working on it for a while. It seemed like Jamar Chase might hold out to get the contract. He ends up playing in week 1 and the rest of the season as well. When the market was, for him, somewhere between $30 and $35 million last offseason, because he was in the middle of that wide receiver explosion. Right now, the highest paid receiver at the very end of that explosion is at $35 million. Jamar Chase, after coming up with a wide receiver triple crown this season, is going to rightfully so deserve and ask for more money than any other receiver is making. So now not only are you looking at paying a wide receiver $36 to $40 million a year, you're looking at paying that exact same guy $36 to $40 million a year because you were too cheap to pay him last season. And you know what his contract would have been like? Probably $34 million if I had to take a shot at it. You would have saved not just money against the cap, but just straight up money in your pocket if you are the owners of the Bengals. The Bengals have been known to be one of the poorer franchises in the NFL. They've been a little stingy with their money. It's been an issue all the way back to when Kurt Warner was their quarterback, right? It just has not worked out for them. These are things that you need to be able to invest in as a franchise if you want to get better. And Joe Burrow has been over there trying to get everyone to buy into this organization. Jamar Chase is going to get a lot of money, and he's going to be the highest paid wide receiver in all of the NFL, and he's going to deserve it. But the Bengals could have had this sorted out last season, and it would not have been as big of a deal because it would have been cheaper. The other one, and the one that I think is a little bit more interesting, is the conversation surrounding T. Higgins. T. Higgins played on a franchise tag last season. A lot of times you see teams give out a franchise tag and then negotiate with the player, try and get the long-term contract done. That happened 7 times last season. The only player to play on the franchise tag last year out of the 8 that were given the tag was T. Higgins. T. Higgins, once again, is a candidate to be franchised. If he does, he's going to get about $26 million. That's more than the average wide receiver franchise tag because he was franchise tagged last time. So he gets 120% rather than 100% of what it would be. T. Higgins, as they say, is going to be working with a deal. We're trying to work out a long-term deal with the Bengals. If they can't, the Bengals have said that they're going to give him that franchise tag at the deadline of March 4th. So keep an eye on him. He might be the first big piece of the puzzle to fall. But the question is, will T. Higgins even play on the franchise tag? We've seen a lot of players in the past refuse to play on franchise tags, refuse to play until they get that long-term contract that they're looking for. And T. Higgins could command top wide receiver money. We're looking over $30 million money if he was able to hit the open market. Now, he has said he wants to come back to Cincinnati. He has said that he wants to play with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and all those guys. But the issue for the Bengals is they're already spending big. It's hard to spend big on quarterback and wide receiver and another wide receiver and defensive end. You just don't see that happen too often in the NFL. And teams can point to the Eagles being able to do it. But the reason that the Eagles were able to do it now is because they got these contracts done years ago. They got these contracts done when it was top dollar and it was the most expensive. But now they're getting them at what seems like a discount. People are calling Jalen Hurts' contract a discount. He's getting paid $51 million a year. That is not a discount, right? The Bengals, if they want to be a cheap organization, the best way to be cheap, and it sounds counterintuitive, the best way to be cheap in the NFL is to extend your guys as quickly as possible, because then those contracts look like bargains later. But what do you think the Bengals are going to be able to do? I don't think they're going to be able to re-sign everybody. Probably going to have to leave one of those guys on the chopping block. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to a very interesting situation this offseason surrounding the Atlanta Falcons, our ongoing series of what a dream offseason might look like. We do a deep dive into the Falcons and how they can get everything they want heading into 2025. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 19th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over what a critical offseason looks like for the Cincinnati Bengals. In this segment, we do a deep dive into one more team in the NFL and what a dream offseason might look like for them in the Atlanta Falcons. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 19th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NFL dream offseason for the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons had a bit of a down year. Not what they expected was going to happen after kind of going all in. They make a big push signing Kirk Cousins to a $180 million deal with $90 million of that guaranteed, and he doesn't even finish off the season as the starter. That goes to the rookie first rounder that they picked in the top 10 in Michael Penix Jr. And Michael Penix Jr. looked really solid. He wasn't able to win most of the games that he was in, but he did keep them close in games where the defense really did fail them down the stretch. In 2024, they went 8-9. They missed the playoffs, finished second in the NFC South behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who they were able to beat twice, but just fell off down the stretch. Now, they're in a very interesting cap space in 2025. They have negative $8 million as it stands right now, so before they can do anything, they need to figure out how to deal with that. And the easiest, most simple way to do that, if you are the Atlanta Falcons, is to deal with the Kirk Cousins contract. Now, obviously, he's the albatross in this room, no matter how you slice it for this offseason, right? You can try and trade him. He does have a no-trade clause, though, and even if you do trade him, it's going to come with a $37.5 million dead cap. That's not going to help your situation. The out for the Falcons is next season. The out for the Falcons for them to get out of this with paying the minimal amount of dead cap, the minimal amount of penalty, is going to be after this year. So I think that Kirk Cousins is actually going to stay on board with the Atlanta Falcons for just this season unless he really asks to be let go. Now, the best way for the Falcons to handle this now is to convert his salary to a signing bonus, kind of like we were talking about with Joe Burrow in the last segment. And if you're able to do that, you can convert his $40 million guaranteed this season to just $22 million of salary, turn the rest into a signing bonus, and that gives the Falcons some cap flexibility. That allows them to re-sign some key free agents, of which they have 30 free agents this season, a bunch of them very important for this team. If they're able to do that, they can go from negative $8 million to just about $12 million of on cap. You get in the positives, you are in business. I think that's the best way for them to deal with Kirk Cousins. If they can find a trade partner, it's going to be tough because Kirk Cousins has to agree with that trade partner. You can try and cut him, but if you cut him before June 1st, it's going to be a $65 million dead cap hit. And if you do it after, it's still going to be a $40 million dead cap hit and then a $25 million dead cap hit in 2026. So again, the best way to deal with it is not a trade. It's not a cut. It's just a restructure of his contract and having him around as a backup quarterback for this season. But when we get into the free agents, the potential free agents for them, like I said, they have 30 pending free agents. There's a bunch of them that meant a lot to them this season. Lorenzo Carter and Matthew Judon, their top two pass rushes, they're both free agents. Starting center since 2021, Drew Dalman, is also in there. He missed 8 games with an ankle injury last season. You've got a lot of your safeties, Richie Grant, Justin Simmons, these guys, a bunch of corners, Mike Hughes, and D. Alford. Both of them were the cornerback 2 and 3 behind A.J. Terrell. You've got some guys that made some key plays throughout the season, Kaderil Hodge, Eddie Goldman, and Nate Landman, to name a couple. Nate Landman and D. Alford are both restricted free agents, but there's a bunch of guys that I feel like the Falcons need to get back. The most important position for them to address has been, for the last 10 years, the edge rusher position. They have not been able to get pressure on the quarterback at all since 2016, really. And even before that, outside of that one season, they've really, really struggled with getting pressure on the quarterback. So some of the guys that I think they need to prioritize re-signing are guys like either Matthew Judon or Lorenzo Carter. I'm more partial to Matthew Judon. He had a bit of a down season last year, only 5.5 sacks, but he is a guy that if you can get him going, get him next to a really good pass rusher, maybe just stack that defensive line with anybody and everybody, he could do a lot better than he did this season. He was getting double teamed a lot this year, and Matthew Judon is a little bit smaller than your typical pass rusher, so he could go out there and he could be a lot better this season if you re-sign him. You also need to re-sign D. Alford. D. Alford is massive for them. They don't have a lot of cornerback depth behind A.J. Terrell. D. Alford, Mike Hughes, both of them free agents. I would go for D. Alford first, then Mike Hughes, but you need to re-sign at least one of those two. And the last one that I think needs to be re-signed, if you are the Atlanta Falcons, is your starting center in Drew Dalman. Drew Dalman has been one of the best centers in the NFL for a very long time. If you go over, he's at the top of just about every single metrics, penalties, or lack of penalties being called against him. The run blocking is really good on that offensive line, and keeping a guy like Drew Dalman is going to do wonders for this team. He's someone that I think they absolutely need to keep. One of the two safeties, either Richie Grant or Justin Simmons, could be really interesting to keep as well. Justin Simmons didn't have his best season last year, but he's a guy that was an all-pro before, has been a thorn in the side for the best quarterback in the NFL in Patrick Mahomes. And Richie Grant, he took a back seat to Justin Simmons last season, but he had started a bunch in years past. So that's someone to take a look at as well. Overall, Drew Dalman, one of either Lorenzo Carter or Matthew Judon, one of either D. Alford or Mike Hughes, and one of either Richie Grant or Justin Simmons should be re-signed by this Falcons team. When you go and look at the free agency, they're not going to have a lot of options. Again, if you go and restructure that Kirk Cousins contract, they're still not going to have too many guys left out there for them to go and get. So I'm looking at a veteran, someone that's going to be able to show up on a 1-year, 2-year kind of prove it or just end your career kind of deal. Top edge rushers in this class, Khalil Mack and Hassan Reddick, I think would be really good down there. Hassan Reddick has been one of the better pass rushers when he plays over the past 5 seasons, and Khalil Mack continues to still be a really elite player all the way through his old age, I guess you should say, in the NFL. Khalil Mack is going to keep playing, whether that's with the Chargers or not. That's up to be decided, but Hassan Reddick, I think, is a guy that they absolutely should target. In the draft, they were at pick number 15. It's not the best spot. There aren't going to be a lot of the guys that you want them to take at the top of the draft. But again, they need edge rushers. They need edge rushers. Mike Green out of Marshall is someone that I mocked to them. He had 17 sacks this season. Shamar Stewart is a guy out of Texas A&M that can be huge up the middle for them. And if for some reason James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee falls to them, you have to take him there. James Pierce Jr. is one of my favorite edge rushers in this class. I don't think he will, but if he's still there at 15, the Falcons need to take him immediately. The other one that I'm looking at, if they end up not re-signing Justin Simmons or Richie Grant, is Malachi Starks. Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia, is a guy that I think is going to be a Kyle Hamilton kind of player. Someone that can play up in the box, can guard receivers, but really be that do-everything kind of guy that defenses really love to use that safety position for. Malachi Starks out of Georgia is one of my favorite players in the draft. He's my second favorite secondary player. I might even take him as far as my favorite players ahead of Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan. I still think maybe not draft him ahead of him, but Malachi Starks is a guy that I really do like on the defensive side of the ball. And if you're looking for a do-it-all kind of safety, someone that can come in and do amazing things for your team, Malachi Starks is that guy. But if I'm the Falcons, first step is figure out the Kirk Cousins contract. Restructure it. Get that money in the cap. That way you can do things this offseason. If not, you're just going to be stuck, and you're going to have to go with what you have, and what you have wasn't good enough this season on defense, and I don't think you're going to be able to hit on it if you don't restructure Kirk Cousins. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to baseball. We continue our ride around the MLB. As the season right around the corner, we turn our attention to the AL. The AL West division is for the rest of the week and the upcoming week as well. We start off with the Texas Rangers. We'll be right back with that here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over what a dream offseason might look like for the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons who have to figure out stuff with Kirk Cousins before anything else can happen. In this segment, we turn our attention to baseball. We continue our preview of every single MLB team, this time taking a look at the Texas Rangers. The Texas Rangers had a bit of a disappointing season after winning the World Series 2 years ago. We'll talk about if they got better this offseason and what they can do to continue their success. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 19th. But like like I was saying, we're going to get into the Texas Rangers and what their season might look like. And the big thing for the Rangers, and the reason that they finished last season 78 and 84, a little bit of World Series hangover, maybe some injuries to key players. They finished third of 5 in the AL West and, of course, missed the playoffs. But one of the bigger reasons why they were just not as good as they were the year before was because the bullpen was awful. The 5th worst bullpen by ERA in the entire major leagues. What they did this offseason was completely retool everything. They went and they got all but two of their projected bullpen is new. Only Jacob Latz and Dane Dunning were there the last season, and they're at the very bottom of the bullpen. The other 6, all projected, starting the projected bullpen, the other 6, all of them are from free agency, and they went out and they spent big. They went out and they added Luke Jackson on a 1-year contract. All veterans. His second stint with the Texas Rangers. He's not coming off his best season. He gave up too many home runs, but the previous 3 seasons he had played before that, he was off in 2022 due to injury, were his best seasons of his career. He was giving up less than 1 home run per 9 innings. He really kept the ball down. He also is a big strikeout guy. Over 10 strikeouts per 9 innings. A great end of bullpen addition for them. Then they brought in Chris Martin. Chris Martin to be their closer this season. Also his second stint in Texas with the Rangers. He also is a guy with over 10 strikeouts per 9 innings. Someone that I think could come in and be a big fireball. This is not going to be a bullpen that's going to blow your socks off, right? But it's going to be a much improved bullpen. If they can even get to top 15 status, that would be massive for a team that had bottom 5 last season. They bring in Sean Armstrong on a 1-year deal. He's coming off the 2 best seasons of his entire career based off of WAR. If he can keep that up this year, he's going to be a huge, huge addition to them, especially in the mid part, setup-ish role of the bullpen. Also bring in Holby Milner and Jacob Webb. Jacob Webb from Baltimore is projected to be the setup for the seventh innings guy in this bullpen. He did outperform his metrics just a little bit. His expected ERA was half a point higher than it was. Same thing with his expected FIP. It was all half a point higher than it really was last season in Baltimore. So maybe he's not a guy that you want to rely on too heavily, but putting him in the 7th inning, I think, is pretty good. But it wasn't just the bullpen that they kind of rehauled. They made a complete switch at first base, trading Nathaniel Lowe to the Washington Nationals in exchange for who's going to be their 8th inning setup guy in Robert Garcia, the hard-throwing lefty. They also traded for a replacement first baseman. They traded for Jake Berger for 3 prospects to the Miami Marlins. Jake Berger is a guy that probably isn't the greatest first baseman, but he is someone that you can throw in. He's a live bat. He's got a little bit of pop in it, and he can play a little bit of defense. First or third, you can give him the day off. This is someone that I think it's a fine replacement for Nathaniel Lowe. Not the best 1-for-1, but those 2 weren't the only additions they got. Those were through trades outside of the bullpen. They also brought in Jock Peterson to be their DH. Jock Peterson is coming off of one of his best seasons of his entire career, where he slugged .515 with 23 home runs, his second best slugging season ever. Jock Peterson for 2 years is going to be huge down in Texas. You also bring in Kyle Higashioka, who's going to be a backup catcher / DH on days when you don't want to have when you don't want to have Jock Peterson in there, or you don't want to have Jonah Heim in there. He can come in and fill in. Higashioka, pretty solid catcher for them to go and grab. But it's not just additions this season for the Texas Rangers. They also lost a couple of guys that really helped them in their World Series run. Max Scherzer is now gone. Kirby Yates is gone this season. Andrew Heaney, gone. Travis Jankowski is gone. Jose Urena is gone. Jose Leclerc and Matt Duffy, all gone in free agency. But overall, I really do like the moves they made. Like I said, last year was really disappointing for them. We look at what this lineup looks like after all the moves were made, and 1 through 6 is pretty solid. We can talk about 7, 8, and 9 later, but 1 through 6 is not going to be the best lineup in baseball, but it's hard to find too many weaknesses with it. Marcus Semien to lead off, one of the best leadoff hitters in baseball. Corey Seager at number 2, Wyatt Langford, the rookie who was the lone bright spot for this team last season, hitting 3rd. He's going to look to continue off of what he did last year. Jock Peterson, we talked about, to play DH. Adolis Garcia, who was huge for them in the World Series run in right field, hitting 5th. And Josh Young at 3rd base has had his moments at the plate. Evan Carter in center field at 7th. Jake Berger, first baseman, hitting 8th. And then Jonah Heim, who is a pretty solid offensive catcher, at 9. That's a really good lineup. They lost a couple key pieces, especially when we're talking about to the pitching staff, but the lineup stayed pretty solid, and I think they're going to have a lot better seasons this year. And the rotation, even though they lost Max Scherzer, even though they lost Andrew Heaney, they still got a really good 1 through 4. They've got Jacob deGrom, who will be coming back off injury, and if he can stay healthy, he's one of the most dominant pitchers in the history of baseball. Nathan Eovaldi comes back. He re-signs on a 3-year deal to return to the Texas Rangers. John Gray continues to be a really solid 3-man, and Tyler Mahle is coming over from the Reds. Coming over from the Reds a couple seasons ago. He is someone that I really do like. He's a guy that I think, if he can hit his true potential, could be one of the better pitchers in this organization. 5, you've got Cody Bradford, but 1 through 4 there is really, really good. They were able to replace a lot of those guys pretty easily. The bullpen, we kind of went over a little bit already when we were talking about free agents that they brought in. But Chris Martin at closer, Robert Garcia and Jacob Webb as your setup men. You've got Luke Jackson, Hoby Milner, Sean Armstrong, and Jacob Latz as your middle relievers, and Dane Dunning in there as your long reliever. This is a much improved bullpen. Like I said, this isn't a bullpen that's going to become one of the top 5, top 10 in baseball, but this is a bullpen that certainly won't sink the ship the way that it did last season. The over-under for this team is set at 85.5. 85.5 for this Rangers team. That, I think, is a little low. I'm really high on this Rangers team this season. I think they're going to come back with everything that they didn't have last season. I think they finished this year with 90 wins. And they end up making the playoffs, maybe even winning their division. We'll wait to see with what happens for the rest of the AL West as we go through it. But over on this one for the Texas Rangers, I really do like this team, what they're doing. With that lineup in particular, I think they're going to be very dangerous offensively. That rotation, again, asterisk here, if they can stay healthy, is one of the better ones in baseball. And the bullpen is just going to be a lot better. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them. What do you think the Rangers might look like this season? How many games do you think they're going to win? What do you think of the starting rotation and the bullpen? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the bubble watch. March is right around the corner. Less than 10 days until March. The seasons are finishing up. We're about to hit conference tournament time. We're going to talk about all the teams on the bubble for the men's and women's tournament coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 19th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over a potential season for the Texas Rangers. In this segment, we turn our attention over to college basketball. March is right around the corner. Conference tournaments are right around the corner. The NCAA tournament is right around the corner. We're going to talk about what teams are on the bubble, what they need to do to get in or out of the tournament. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 19th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of bubble watch here. The men's tournament is, of course, one of the bigger things in all of the sports calendar, but there are plenty of questions surrounding some of these teams trying to get in or out. Of course, only 37 auto bids after the conference champions get in, not leaving too much room. But one of the teams on the bubble for the NCAA tournament that just came out with a huge win is BYU. The Cougars just handed Kansas a 34-point loss. That is the biggest loss in the Bill Self era. In the history of Bill Self being a coach at Kansas, 34 points this year by this BYU squad, the biggest loss that they have ever given. The Cougars are sitting at 18-8 this season, 9-6 in the Big 12, just behind Texas Tech and a couple of those big boys up top, Arizona, Iowa State, Houston. They're in there with a net ranking at 31. They're 4-7 in with their quad 1 record. That should be enough to get in. They still have a couple of tough opponents coming up. They still have to take on Texas Tech. That's never easy. But this is a team that, as long as they take care of business, I think BYU win a game or two in the Big 12 championship, in the Big 12 title tournament. I think they can find their way in. They're one of those teams that I think finds their way in. UC San Diego is a really interesting school. We get into a little bit of the mid-major conversation here. They're a team that's very similar to the Indiana State Sycamores last season as far as where they stand. The Sycamores were unable to win their conference, so they ended up going all the way to the finals in the NIT tournament. They did not get in at large. They were one of the first teams not to make it. It's going to be tough, especially when you have a not so great strength of schedule. San Diego is a team that I think is really good. It's got good analytics with it as well, but San Diego not quite going to be able to make it, especially with the surplus of talent coming out of the top conferences like the SEC. It's going to be tough. I think as long as if they don't win the conference tournament, I think they'll be one of those first teams out. North Carolina is all but out of it at this point. They've taken two pretty brutal losses in the last couple weeks, one to Duke, a top team in the nation, and then one to Clemson by 20 points. It seems like North Carolina is just about out at this point. Maybe they can pull a miracle. This is a North Carolina team that has a lot of history behind it, right? This is a North Carolina team that thought they were ranked in the top 10 to begin the season. If they can make a run in the ACC championship, in the ACC tournament, maybe they can find a way in, but they're all but out of it at this point. Another team that needs a good showing at the conference tournament is Indiana. Indiana is a team that, again, started this season in the top 25. Like a lot of the teams on this list, they're sitting as the last team in or first team out in a lot of different models. I think, again, I think they're kind of closer to being in than out at this point, but it is going to be very important about how they show up at the Big Ten tournament. Teams that also finished up there that have struggled, Rutgers is already out at this point. You've got tournaments that potentially, you had conferences that potentially, like the SEC, could have 14 teams. There's a couple of those teams at the bottom that are still hanging on. They'll probably get in because of the strength of schedule, but a team like Vanderbilt, a team like Oklahoma that has really struggled in conference play after being dominant in non-conference is a team that might struggle to find their way in because it's hard to seed so many SEC schools. Vanderbilt, I think, finds their way in. Oklahoma, one of those teams that probably finds their way in because of the SEC strength, but because of the SEC, but again, it's not so much of a guarantee. Anthony asks, who's more likely to win the Big 12 title first in football, Utah or BYU? I tend to lean towards Utah there a little bit because they've had just the better football program in general. As of late, BYU ended up being better this season, but I think Utah probably has the leg up for now. They've still got Cam Rising there, which is wild, but that is that's a little bit out of season here for now. The men's tournament, again, right around the corner, and we'll do more updates as we get further and further into conference tournament season, into the March Madness season, but we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the other side of the coin, the women's tournament. The women's March Madness tournament has been growing. It was even more popular than the men's last season. We'll talk about some bubble teams over there, who finds their way in, who finds their way out, and some surprising multi-bid leagues that could be there for the women's tournament. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 19th. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over some Bubble Watch teams for the men's March Madness. In this segment, we turn our attention over to the women's side of things as their season is coming down to the wire as well. Some teams on the bubble that might find their way in or out of the tournament. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 19th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into a little bit of the Women's March Madness Bubble Watch here. There's a couple teams that I wanted to point out here. We're going to start off with Virginia Tech, one of the teams that lost a coach earlier this season. ESPN has them as one of the last four in. They're a part of that 11-seed play-in tournament. Virginia Tech, as part of the ACC, would be the third or fourth bid most likely for the women's side of things. Virginia Tech was a top 5 seed last season. They've fallen off just a little bit after losing some talent to the WNBA, losing some talent as far as the transfer portal goes. But this is a team that I think should find their way in Virginia Tech. It's just going to be a little harder than it has been in years past. James Madison, another Virginia team, is one that I think is on the bubble, probably should get in. I think they'll end up winning the Sun Belt tournament either way. They have just 4 losses on the season. They're undefeated in Sun Belt play. 3 of their 4 losses are to top 15 teams, and 2 of those losses are to the top 2 teams in the country right now. They got absolutely smoked by Notre Dame, got killed by Texas. They kept that one a little closer than a lot of people thought, but still ended up losing by 30 points in both of those games, as well as losing to North Carolina State. All of those are going to be hosting in the first couple rounds. Their other loss comes against Northern Arizona, another bubble team, by 1 point in overtime. James Madison, I think, should get in, again, undefeated in conference play. So even if they don't get that automatic bid, I think they'll find their way in this season. A league that I think is really interesting, though, as we take a look at some bids, some leagues that don't usually get multiple bids, is the Ivy League. They have three programs rated in the top 50 net rankings: Harvard at 34, Columbia at 42, and Princeton at 49. Generally, being in that top 50 is a pretty good spot to sit when you're talking about getting an at-large bid. A lot of those teams are already going to get in automatically, and if you're in that top 50, it makes it a little bit easier. Being a 3-bid league in the Ivies, it doesn't happen all that often. I think this is a year where it could go through, but it does depend because two of these 3 teams still play each other as we get down the stretch of the season. The women's basketball also has just had a lot of incredible performances, right? You have a lot of these guys coming out from the top. A lot of these as far as Charlie McAvoy's injury. We'll be right back. You're on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 19th. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the bubble watch for the men's and women's March Madness tournament. In this segment, we turn our attention to the world of hockey. There is a finals for the Four Nations face-off taking place tomorrow, but I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with Charlie McAvoy, the U.S., and them trying to find a replacement. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 19th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into a little bit of NHL Four Nations talk. Again, a massive rematch as Canada takes on the U.S. tomorrow. We'll break down that game more in depth in tomorrow's show. But what I want to talk about now is what's going on with Charlie McAvoy and the U.S. as far as injuries go. Charlie McAvoy, one of the top defensemen in all of the NHL, was a part of their team. He had a hand injury. It got infected. And now he's a member of the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins not very happy about the way it turned out, the way that the Minnesota Wild's medical staff was handling it. The Minnesota Wild are the team that's in charge of the medical staff at the Four Nations face-off for the U.S. Boston, the host city, it's not a good sign. Charlie McAvoy is someone that might be out for a while, but the U.S., trying to find a replacement for him, have called on Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes, who's having a renaissance of a season for himself over in Vancouver. He's been really good for the Canucks this season. Did not make the roster at the beginning, but now they're trying to bring him in as an injury replacement. And at first, it was a solid no. And then it was if you get down to the right amount of players, which it seemed like they might be able to, because Jake Sanderson got called in for jury duty of all things on Thursday for the Four Nations finals. He probably will be able to get out of that, but if he can't, Quinn Hughes has flown into Boston. Now, more news coming out on that has come out and said that Quinn Hughes is not going to be a member of it. He's just there in Boston, which Team USA seemed like they were flying him in to be a member of the team. They've been notified that he can't come in. They are allowing them to bring in Tage Thompson to be an injury replacement for Matthew Tkachuk in case he can't go. He's dealing with a little bit of an injury that kept him out of the end of the U.S.-Canada match on Saturday. This is one that I think the U.S. and Canada both won really badly. They're going out there. We saw how physical it was on Saturday. Not only the 3 fights in 9 seconds, but there were 64 hits in that game. That is 33% more than usual in an NHL game. They were going hard. They were going fast. A Four Nations face-off taking place tomorrow. We're gonna preview it then. But thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow. Again, talking Four Nations Face-Off, continuing our series, previewing the NFL offseason and the NHL season, as well as going over everything else that's happening around the world of sports. See you then. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that